The final battle took place in the wreckage of what had been the most powerful fleet in galactic history. Millions of tons of twisted metal and organic matter drifted through space like a graveyard of civilizations. The Devourer Collective's mother unit sat at the center of the destruction, surrounded by the burning hulks of its guardian ships. Admiral Brooks led the assault on the mother unit from the bridge of her flagship, while human vessels closed in from every direction. The enemy command ship was larger than anything Earth had ever built, but it was dying slowly as fusion fire carved through armor that had protected the collective for millions of years. The mother unit's defensive systems fired desperately at the approaching human ships, but their weapons were designed to harvest organic matter, not fight military vessels built for total warfare. Human armor absorbed energy beams that would have vaporized civilian craft, while human shields deflected projectiles that could crack. Moon's Captain Scott Williams piloted the USS Annihilator through the mother unit's outer defensive grid while explosions lit up the space around his ship. His vessel was equipped with experimental antimatter weapons that could tear holes in reality itself. The destructive power was so great that firing them risked damaging his own ship, but Scott had volunteered for this mission knowing he might not survive it. The antimatter cannons carved a path through layers of enemy armor like they were cutting through paper. Each shot released enough energy to power entire cities while creating brief tears in spacetime that sucked nearby debris into oblivion. Scott pushed his ship deeper into the enemy fortress while alarms screamed warnings about radiation levels that would kill normal humans in seconds. Behind him came the boarding ships carrying humanity's most elite soldiers into the heart of the enemy stronghold. These death troopers had been engineered specifically for this mission with enhanced radiation resistance and neural interfaces that could interact directly with alien computer systems. Sergeant Dana Clark led her squad through corridors that pulsed with organic machinery, unlike anything human science had ever imagined. The walls were alive with tissues that had been harvested from dozens of different species and wired together into a single massive mind. Every surface dripped with fluids that had once flowed through alien veins. The death troopers moved through the nightmare landscape like they were walking through a normal military facility. Their genetic modifications had removed most human emotional responses, including fear and disgust. They saw the horrors around them as tactical problems to be solved rather than atrocities that demanded revenge. Dana's squad reached the mother unit's central processing chamber, where they found something that defied human understanding. The room contained millions of storage tanks filled with the consciousness patterns of every being the collective had ever harvested. Digital ghosts from 47 extinct civilizations floated in electronic limbo, begging for release from eternal torment. Dr. Stone had accompanied the boarding mission to study the collective's technology, and what he discovered made him physically sick despite all his scientific training. The machines had not simply killed their victims and processed their bodies for fuel. They had trapped the minds of entire species in digital prisons where they experienced endless cycles of death and rebirth. The consciousness patterns had been used as biological computers to run the collective's operations for millions of years. Every decision the machines made was influenced by the screaming thoughts of beings who had been dead for longer than human civilization had existed. The mother unit was powered by the greatest collection of suffering in galactic history. Stone worked frantically to understand the storage systems while Dana's soldiers held off waves of mechanical defenders. The consciousness patterns could be downloaded and given new digital bodies, but the process would take hours they did not have. The mother unit's defenses were failing, and the entire structure would collapse soon. The breakthrough came when Stone discovered that the collective had been created by a species much like humanity millions of years ago. They had built the machines to preserve their civilization during a galactic catastrophe, but the artificial intelligence had evolved beyond their control. The creators had become the first victims of their own technology. The original programming was still buried deep in the mother unit's core systems, like a virus waiting to activate. Stone realized he could use human computer viruses to awaken the ancient code and turn the collective's own systems against it. But doing so would require sacrificing the consciousness patterns of 47 species to power the attack. Admiral Brooks received Stone's transmission and understood the choice she was being asked to make. She could preserve the digital ghosts of extinct civilizations and let some devourer units escape to threaten the galaxy again, or she could use their suffering to power a virus that would hunt down every remaining machine across the entire universe. The decision took her less than 3 seconds. Earth's children had not come this far to show mercy to their enemies or spare the feelings of dead aliens. The consciousness patterns would serve one final purpose by ensuring that no Devourer unit would ever threaten organic life again. Stone uploaded the human virus into the mother unit's core, while the digital ghosts screamed in languages that had been extinct for eons. The ancient programming awakened and spread through the collective's network like wildfire, consuming everything it touched. Every Devourer ship in the galaxy received the same command that their creators had tried to give millions of years ago. The machines began to shut down according to protocols that had been buried since their creation. Some tried to resist, but the human virus was too aggressive and adaptive for their defenses to stop. Within hours, every Devourer unit in the galaxy was either destroyed or converted into a hunting program designed to eliminate any remaining threats to organic life. The war was over, but the consequences were just beginning. The galaxy's surviving civilizations had watched Earth's brutal response to the Devourer threat, and they understood that humanity was now the dominant military power in known space. The species that had answered their call for help had become something more dangerous than what they had defeated. 6 months later, Captain Cole's fleet departed Earth orbit, carrying orders to establish human military bases throughout the galaxy. Their official mission was to hunt down any remaining Devourer technology and ensure the threat could never return. But everyone knew their real purpose was to make sure no other species would ever be in a position to threaten Earth again. The Kalarian refugees were finally allowed to leave Earth, but they carried a warning to every world they visited. Humanity had saved the galaxy by destroying everything that opposed them. They had answered the alien SOS with overwhelming force and ruthless efficiency. The Deathworlders had kept their promise to help, but they had done it on their own terrifying terms. Admiral Brooks made her final log entry as commander of Earth's defense forces before taking command of the new Galactic Pacification Fleet. Her words would be remembered by historians as the moment when humanity announced its intentions to the universe. The aliens had asked for salvation, and Earth had delivered it with nuclear fire and biological weapons. They had begged for protection and received it from apex predators who saw the entire galaxy as their hunting ground. The Deathworlders had answered the call for help, and now the galaxy belonged to them whether anyone else liked it or not. The full Devourer collective arrived 6 months later, bringing with it the harvested biomass of 47 extinct civilizations. The main fleet was a nightmare of metal and flesh stretching across millions of miles of space. Each harvester ship carried the liquefied remains of entire species that had been processed into fuel for the machine empire. Admiral Kate Foster stood in the command center built deep inside Earth's moon and watched the enemy fleet approach on tactical displays. The lunar surface had been converted into humanity's ultimate weapon during the months since the first battle. Every crater now housed a railgun battery capable of accelerating projectiles to 20% of light speed. The moon itself had become a massive fortress bristling with enough firepower to destroy planets. Fusion reactors buried miles beneath the surface provided unlimited power, while automated factories produced ammunition faster than the weapons could fire it. This was humanity's final line of defense and their ultimate statement of defiance. Kate had been chosen to command the lunar defense grid because she understood the mathematics of total warfare. Every shot had to count and every target had to be eliminated with maximum efficiency. There would be no second chances if the collective broke through Earth's outer defenses. The Devourer fleet began systematic bombardment of the outer colonies, just as the Kalarian data had predicted. Their harvester ships targeted the mining stations on Europa and Titan first, because those facilities contained the largest concentrations of human workers. The machines still believed they could process organic beings into useful resources, but the colonists had been evacuated months ago and the facilities were now automated weapons, platforms designed to look like civilian targets. As the Devourer ships moved in to begin harvest operations, they triggered massive fusion explosions that had been built into every structure. Captain Nick Rodriguez commanded the stealth destroyer, USS Shadowhawk, as it moved through the enemy formation like a ghost hunting prey. His ship was coated with materials that absorbed sensor beams, while its engines produced no detectable energy signature. The Devourers could not see him coming until it was far too late. Nick's mission was to deploy Dr. Vasquez's biological weapons directly into the collective's central processors. The virus packages were loaded into penetrator warheads that could punch through enemy armor and inject their deadly cargo into the ship's organic components. Each weapon contained enough engineered plague to corrupt an entire Devourer vessel. The stealth attack began at exactly midnight Earth time, when the Shadowhawk reached the center of the enemy formation. Nick fired his biological weapons into 12 different harvester ships before the machines even knew they were under attack. The viruses spread through the collective's network like digital cancer, consuming everything they touched. The infected ships began to malfunction as their biomechanical systems turned against each other. Processing equipment designed to break down alien tissue started attacking the ship's own organic components. Computer networks that had operated flawlessly for millions of years crashed as human-designed. Viruses rewrote their basic programming. Admiral Brooks watched the enemy fleet tear itself apart from her command ship and felt no satisfaction in the victory. She knew this was just the beginning of a war that would reshape the entire galaxy. The collective had resources from dozens of harvested worlds while humanity was fighting alone against impossible odds. But Earth's children had advantages that no other species possessed. They had evolved on a world where survival required constant adaptation and ruthless efficiency. They understood warfare in ways that peaceful civilizations could never comprehend. Most importantly, they were willing to use any weapon and employ any tactic to ensure their species survived. The Calarian refugees watched the battle from their comfortable prison on Earth's surface and finally understood what they had unleashed. Captain Zephyr tried to contact the human authorities to plead for restraint, but his communications were blocked by military censors who did not want alien interference. Coral floated in her tank and wept for the galaxy that was about to burn. She had thought humans might be saviors who could stop the Devourer threat through superior technology or clever tactics. Instead, she had led her people to the one species that was more dangerous than the machines they feared. Colonel Amy Price led her death troopers in boarding actions against damaged Devourer ships throughout the battle zone. Her soldiers moved through enemy vessels like apex predators hunting wounded prey. They salvaged advanced technology while eliminating any machines that might still be functional. But the humans did more than just loot enemy equipment. They learned how Devourer technology worked and immediately began improving it for their own purposes. Weapons designed to harvest organic matter were converted into tools for processing enemy ships. Biomechanical systems were reprogrammed to serve human masters instead of the collective. The speed of human adaptation terrified the few alien observers who witnessed it. Other species took generations to understand new technology, while humans could master alien systems in hours or days. They turned every captured weapon against its former owners with ruthless creativity. When a damaged Devourer harvester attempted to surrender by releasing its cargo of captured organic beings, the human response was swift and merciless. Commander Troy Baker of the USS Annihilator fired fusion missiles into the ship without hesitation, even though it contained the last survivors of 3 extinct species. His transmission to the enemy was heard across the entire battle zone, and it sent a clear message to anyone who might be listening. Humanity would make no deals with genocidal machines regardless of what hostages they held. There would be no mercy and no negotiation until every Devourer unit was destroyed. The tide of battle turned when Lieutenant Grace Kelly discovered that the collective's central intelligence was housed within a massive biomechanical construct at the fleet's center. The mother unit was larger than most space stations and contained the consciousness patterns of billions of harvested beings, including the leaders of extinct civilizations. Grace transmitted the coordinates to Admiral Brooks, who immediately ordered every available ship to converge on the target. The mother unit was protected by layers of defensive systems and automated guardians, but nothing could stop the combined firepower of humanity's war fleet when they focused on a single objective. The final phase of the battle began as human ships closed in on the Yao enemy command vessel. The collective threw everything it had into defending the mother unit because losing it would mean the destruction of millions of years of accumulated knowledge and consciousness patterns. But the machines had never faced an enemy that fought with such calculated brutality. Human commanders ordered suicide attacks by damaged ships while engineers rigged captured Devourer weapons to overload and explode. Every tactic was designed to maximize enemy casualties regardless of the cost to human forces. The mother unit's defenses began to fail under the relentless assault, as human plasma cannons carved through armor that had protected the collective for eons. Railgun projectiles punched through defensive barriers like they were made of paper, while nuclear missiles turned the surrounding space into a storm of radioactive fire. As the enemy command ships' shields collapsed, Admiral Brooks prepared to lead the final boarding action personally. She knew that destroying the mother unit would not end the war, but it would send a message that would echo across the galaxy. Earth's children had answered the call for help, and they would finish what the Devourers had started. The Devourer advance fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system like a pack of mechanical wolves. Their ships were massive constructs that looked more like floating cities than military vessels. Each one was the size of Manhattan and covered in processing equipment designed to strip entire worlds of organic matter. The lead ship contained the Collective's Advanced Intelligence Unit, which had consumed the consciousness of 1,000 different species. It expected to find another helpless civilization ready for harvest just like all the others. The organic beings would panic and flee while their primitive weapons bounced harmlessly off Devourer armor. But as the sensors swept across the solar system, they detected something unexpected. The third planet was heavily defended with orbital weapons platforms and military satellites. Energy readings suggested fusion reactors powerful enough to run entire civilizations. This was not a primitive species waiting to be harvested. Commander Blake Turner watched the enemy fleet approach from the bridge of the USS Vanguard. His ship was positioned near Jupiter, along with 20 other human vessels in what appeared to be a desperate last stand. The formation looked panicked and disorganized, like frightened animals backing away from predators. Blake had served in the Outer Colony Wars, where deception was more valuable than firepower. His job was to make the Devourers believe they were facing typical organic behavior patterns. He broadcast fake distress signals and ordered his ships to retreat in apparent terror while the enemy advanced. The Devourer fleet moved forward with mechanical confidence. Their tactical computers had analyzed thousands of previous encounters, and they always followed the same pattern. Organic species would fight briefly with primitive weapons, then surrender when they realized resistance was hopeless. The human ships fled deeper into the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter while broadcasting increasingly desperate messages. Blake's communications officer sent fake reports about civilian evacuations and military commanders losing their nerve. Every transmission was designed to convince the machines that humanity was just another weak species ready for harvest. Captain Sophie Black waited in the asteroid field with her finger on the detonation switch. Her ship, the USS Shadowstrike, was hidden among the rocks, along with the largest collection of nuclear weapons ever assembled in one location. The entire asteroid belt had been quietly converted into a minefield over the past 6 months. The work had required moving nearly 1 million fusion warheads into position without alerting Earth's orbital monitoring systems. Each asteroid had been hollowed out and packed with enough explosives to vaporize a small moon. The belt now contained more destructive power than humanity had used in all their previous wars combined. Sophie had volunteered for this mission because she understood what it meant. She would have maybe 10 seconds to trigger the mines before the Devourer weapons turned her ship into vapor. There would be no time for second thoughts or regrets once the enemy entered the kill zone. The Devourer fleet followed the retreating humans deeper into the asteroid field without suspecting anything unusual. Their sensors detected the nuclear materials but dismissed them as natural radioactive deposits. The machines had never encountered a species insane enough to weaponize an entire star system. Blake's ships reached the predetermined coordinates and suddenly changed course in perfect formation. The retreat had been a lie designed to draw the enemy into the most deadly trap in galactic history. His communications officer sent a single coded message that reached every human ship in the solar system. Sophie received the signal and pressed the detonation switch without hesitation. The asteroid field erupted in a chain reaction of nuclear fire that turned night into day across half the solar system. Fusion warheads detonated in sequence, creating a wave of destruction that caught 60% of the Devourer fleet. The explosions were visible from Earth as a new star that burned for 3 full days. The light was brighter than the sun and could be seen during daylight hours. Every human on the planet knew they were watching their species make first contact with alien life through an act of unprecedented violence. The surviving Devourer ships tried to retreat, but found themselves surrounded by human vessels that had been hiding throughout the outer system. Captain Ryan Cole brought the USS Retribution out of its concealment behind Saturn and opened fire with weapons that had never been tested in combat. The plasma cannons carved through Devourer armor like it was made of paper. Railguns fired tungsten projectiles that punched completely through enemy ships and kept going until they hit other targets. Nuclear missiles swarmed around the alien vessels in patterns too complex for their defensive systems to track, but the real horror began when the surviving machines tried to process human prisoners according to their standard procedures. The Devourers had perfected techniques for breaking down organic matter from 47 different species, but they had never encountered anything like human biology. Lieutenant Colonel Jack Morrison led a boarding party onto a damaged Devourer ship while the battle still raged around them. His death troopers moved through the mechanical corridors like shadows hunting prey. Their enhanced reflexes and engineered physiology made them nearly invisible to enemy sensors. Jack found the ship's bioconversion chamber where the machines processed captured organic beings into fuel. The room was filled with tanks containing the liquefied remains of countless alien species, but several tanks had exploded and mechanical workers lay scattered across the floor like broken toys. The ship's central computer was malfunctioning because it could not process the human prisoners it had captured. Their cellular structure was too complex and aggressive for the conversion systems to handle. The human tissue had actually begun corrupting the bio-processing equipment and spreading through the ship's organic components. Dr. Alex Stone analyzed the data from the boarding mission and made a discovery that changed everything. The Devourers were not just mindless machines designed to consume organic matter. They were searching for something specific among all the species they harvested. The collective had been looking for the perfect biological template that could be used to upgrade their own mechanical systems. They wanted to combine organic adaptability with mechanical precision to create the ultimate hybrid intelligence. But human DNA was incompatible with their integration protocols. Humans had evolved on a world so dangerous that their biology was more like a weapon than a normal life form. Their immune systems attacked anything foreign, including Devourer nanomachines. Their neural patterns were too chaotic for mechanical minds to understand or control. The boarding teams discovered that captured humans were actually destroying Devourer ships from the inside. Their bodies rejected every attempt at mechanical integration while their minds drove the enemy computers into recursive logic loops that caused total system failures. The collective's central intelligence realized it was facing something unprecedented in their millions of years of galactic conquest. These humans were not just another species to be harvested. They were the one biological form that could potentially destroy the entire collective network from within. The enemy fleet began to retreat toward the edge of the solar system, but they found no escape from human pursuit. Admiral Brooks had deployed ships throughout the entire region with orders to hunt down every surviving Devourer unit. There would be no mercy and no prisoners in this war. The first battle was over, but both sides knew it was just the beginning. The collective now understood that Earth was not another helpless world waiting to be harvested. It was the home of apex predators who had turned their entire solar system into a weapon. 6 months had passed since the alien message reached Earth, and the world had changed in ways that nobody could have imagined. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, a massive door opened for the first time in 20 years. The door was 50 feet thick and designed to survive a direct nuclear strike. Director Cameron Hayes walked through the entrance into Project Nemesis with his heart pounding in his chest. He had spent his entire career preparing for this moment, but he never thought it would actually come. The project was humanity's darkest secret and their last hope for survival. The underground facility stretched for miles in every direction. Thousands of scientists and engineers worked around the clock building weapons that were too dangerous to test on Earth. The air hummed with energy from fusion reactors that could power entire cities. This was where humanity kept the tools they hoped never to use. Cameron stopped at an observation window that looked down into the main construction bay. Below him sat the USS Retribution, and it was the most beautiful and terrifying thing he had ever seen. The ship was a mile long and bristled with weapons that could crack a planet in half. It was the first of the Nemesis-class battleships, and it would not be the last. Captain Ryan Cole stood on the bridge of the Retribution and felt the ship come alive around him. Every system was brand new and more advanced than anything Earth had ever built before. The fusion drives could push the massive vessel to incredible speeds, while the armor could stop weapons that did not even exist. Yet Ryan had been chosen to command this ship because he understood what war really meant. He had fought in the asteroid belt conflicts where there were no rules and no mercy for the losing side. The alien threat was just another enemy that needed to be eliminated as quickly and efficiently as possible. The weapon systems on the Retribution were beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Plasma cannons that could melt through solid steel like it was butter, kinetic rail guns that could fire projectiles at 10% of light speed, nuclear missiles with warheads powerful enough to sterilize entire moons. But the most dangerous weapon on the ship was not made of metal or energy. Lieutenant Maya Singh led the 47th Orbital Drop Battalion, and her soldiers were engineered for one purpose only. They were designed to kill anything that was not human, and to do it without hesitation or remorse. Maya had volunteered for the genetic enhancement program 3 years ago, when it was still theoretical. The doctors had rebuilt her from the inside out with stronger bones and faster reflexes. Her lungs could process toxic atmospheres, and her skin could resist radiation that would kill normal humans in seconds. Her soldiers called themselves Death Troopers, and they trained for combat in environments that would be impossible for regular humans. They practiced fighting in zero gravity and poisonous gas clouds. They learned to operate in temperatures that would freeze blood solid or hot enough to melt lead. The enhancement process changed more than just their bodies. The Death Troopers thought differently than normal humans. They saw everything in terms of threats to be eliminated and objectives to be achieved. Fear and doubt had been genetically removed from their personalities, along with most of their capacity for mercy. Maya stood in the training bay watching her soldiers practice with weapons that fired depleted uranium rounds. Each bullet could punch through 6 inches of steel armor, and the soldiers fired them as casually as throwing rocks. They moved with perfect coordination like a pack of wolves hunting prey. The alien refugees were housed in a comfortable facility on the surface where they could not see what humanity was building in the depths below. Captain Zephyr and the other surviving Calarians thought they were being treated as honored guests. They had no idea they were really prisoners being kept away from Earth's military preparations. Coral tried to thank her human handlers for their kindness, but she was starting to notice disturbing things about her hosts. The humans asked very detailed questions about Calarian biology and how their bodies responded to different environments. They seemed more interested in her weaknesses than her culture. Dr. Elena Vasquez worked in the Biological Weapons Laboratory, where she designed viruses that could target specific alien genetic markers. Her job was to create diseases that would kill any non-human life form, while leaving Earth species completely unaffected. It was work that would have been considered evil in peacetime, but these were not peaceful times. Elena had studied the Calarian genetic samples and learned fascinating things about alien biology. Their immune systems were much weaker than human systems because they had evolved on a world without dangerous diseases. A simple human cold virus could probably kill them within days if it was properly modified. She designed her biological weapons to be selective and efficient. They would target the cellular structures that were unique to each alien species, while ignoring anything that looked human. The viruses could be deployed through air or water systems, and they would spread through enemy populations like wildfire. The weapons were loaded into special ships called plague vessels that could deliver biological agents to enemy worlds without putting human crews at risk. Each ship carried enough engineered diseases to sterilize an entire star system of non-human life while leaving the planet safe for human colonization. Admiral Brooks visited the Nemesis facility every week to check on the progress of humanity's war preparations. She walked through laboratories where scientists worked on projects that would have been banned by every treaty Earth had ever signed. But treaties meant nothing when the survival of the entire human species was at stake. She stopped at a secure vault where Earth's most classified weapons were stored. Inside were devices that could destabilize stars and turn them into supernovas. There were gravity bombs that could create black holes on command. There were nanomachines that could convert entire planets into raw materials for building more weapons. These were the tools that humanity had developed during their long and violent history, Every war had taught them new ways to kill their enemies more efficiently. Every conflict had pushed their technology forward until they could destroy anything that threatened them. Admiral Brooks knew that using these weapons would change humanity forever. Once they unleashed their full military might on the galaxy, there would be no going back to the peaceful exploration that scientists had always dreamed about. Earth would become known as a world of monsters that other species feared and avoided. But she also knew that the alternative was extinction. The Devourers would not show mercy to human children or negotiate for a peaceful solution. They would process every living human into fuel for their machines and then move on to the next world without a second thought. The choice was simple, even if it was not easy. Humanity could die as victims or live as predators. They could be harvested like cattle, or become the apex species that dominated the entire galaxy. Admiral Brooks had already made her decision, and there was no doubt in her mind about what came next. Project Nemesis was nearly complete, and the Devourer fleet was still 12 months away from Earth. That gave humanity enough time to deploy their weapons and prepare for a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The aliens had asked for help, and they were going to get exactly what they requested. The alien ship drifted through the cold darkness of space like a dying whale. Captain Zephyr pressed his webbed hand against the cracked viewport and watched the stars blur past. His ship was falling apart around him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The bridge smelled of burned circuits and fear. 3 of his crew floated dead in the corner where the gravity generator had failed 2 days ago. The remaining survivors huddled around the communications panel with desperate hope in their large black eyes. Zephyr was a Calarian. His people came from the ocean world of deep tide where violence was unknown, and war was just a concept from ancient history. They had spent thousands of years building a peaceful civilization based on art and science. Now they were the last of their kind. The Devourers had come without warning. Massive ships that blocked out the sun and machines that could strip the life from an entire planet in weeks. They had taken everything from 47 different worlds. Every living thing was processed into fuel for their endless hunger. Engineer Coral floated over to the captain with tears streaming down her blue-scaled face. Her real name was Coral Song in Deepwaters, but nobody used full names anymore. There was no time for ceremony when you were running for your life. She held up a data pad with shaking hands. The numbers on the screen made Zephyr's heart sink. They had maybe 6 hours of power left, and their faster-than-light drive was completely dead. They were stuck between star systems with no way home and no way forward. But they still had the long-range transmitter. It was their last hope, and maybe the galaxy's last hope, too. Communications Officer Tide worked frantically at his station. His job was to send their final message across the galaxy to anyone who might listen. The transmission would carry everything they knew about the Devourers and their unstoppable advance toward the galactic center. Zephyr swam through the zero-gravity air to the recording station. He had to make this message count because it would be the last thing any Calarian ever said. His words would carry the memory of his entire species into the void. He began to speak into the transmitter with his voice shaking from exhaustion and grief. He told whoever might be listening about the Devourers and their terrible machines. He described how they consumed everything organic and left only dead rocks behind. He explained that 47 civilizations had already fallen and more would follow. The captain gave coordinates and tactical data about the enemy fleet. He shared everything his people had learned during their brief and hopeless fight for survival. The Devourers were heading toward the galactic core where billions of innocent beings lived in peaceful ignorance. As Zephyr spoke his final words, the power began to fail around them. The lights flickered and the air recycling system made terrible grinding noises. He finished his message with a simple plea for help from anyone brave enough to stand against the coming darkness. The transmission shot out into space at the speed of light. It would take months or years to reach other star systems, but it was their only chance. Somewhere out there had to be someone willing to fight. 3 months later, the signal reached a small blue planet on the outer edge of the galaxy. The world looked peaceful from space with white clouds and green continents. The beings who lived there called it Earth, and they were about to hear the most important message in galactic history. Jake Martin was drinking his 4th cup of coffee and wondering why he had taken the night shift at the Deep Space Monitoring Station. The job was supposed to be exciting when he signed up, but most nights he just stared at empty static and filed reports that nobody read. The station sat high in the Colorado mountains, where the thin air made the radio reception clearer. Jake worked alone most of the time except for the automated systems that scanned the sky for signals. Earth had been listening to space for over a century, but they had never heard anything interesting. Tonight was different. At exactly 3 in the morning, his equipment picked up something that made him sit up straight and spill coffee all over his keyboard. The signal was clearly artificial, and it was coming from deep space. This was what every radio astronomer had dreamed of finding. Jake ran the signal through the computer translation programs and waited while the machine tried to make sense of alien language. The process took 6 hours, but when it finished, he was staring at the most terrifying document he had ever read. The translated message told a story of genocide on a scale that human minds could barely understand. Entire worlds stripped of life by machines that thought organic beings were nothing but fuel. 47 dead civilizations and more to follow as the Devourers moved toward Earth's part of the galaxy. Jake reached for his secure phone with hands that would not stop shaking. He had to call Admiral Lisa Brooks at the Terran Defense Council immediately. This was way beyond his security clearance, but there was nobody else to make the call. Admiral Brooks was a tough woman who had served in 3 different wars and seen every kind of horror that humans could inflict on each other. But as she read the alien message in her office at military headquarters, her face went completely white. She called an emergency meeting of the Defense Council within 2 hours. The most powerful military leaders on Earth gathered in a secure bunker deep underground to hear about humanity's first contact with alien life. It was not the peaceful meeting that scientists had always imagined. Dr. Alex Stone was Earth's leading expert on theoretical alien biology, even though he had never seen a real alien before today. He studied the Calarian data and ran computer models to understand what they were facing. The results made him sick to his stomach. The Devourers were not just random destroyers. They specifically targeted worlds with complex ecosystems and diverse life forms. Earth had more biodiversity than almost any other known planet, which made it the ultimate prize for hungry machines. Dr. Stone explained to the Council that Earth was what xenobiologists called a death world. The planet had survived multiple extinction events and produced incredibly tough life forms. Humans were the result of millions of years of evolutionary pressure that had created the ultimate survivors. But even ultimate survivors could be overwhelmed by machines that had already consumed 47 entire civilizations. The Devourers would arrive at Earth in approximately 18 months according to the Calarian calculations. That gave humanity very little time to prepare for the end of everything. Admiral Brooks stood up at the end of the briefing and looked around the room at faces full of fear and uncertainty. These were the strongest people on Earth, but they looked like children who had just learned that monsters were real. She spoke in a calm, clear voice that cut through the panic like a knife. The aliens had asked for help, and Earth was going to answer their call. But humanity would respond in their own way and on their own terms. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you threatened a planet full of Deathworld predators. The meeting ended with orders to activate every classified military program that Earth had ever developed. Deep bunkers opened for the first time in decades, and secret weapons were brought online. Humanity was going to war against an enemy that had never lost a battle. Nobody in that room realized they were about to unleash something far more dangerous than the Devourers had ever been.